This is Dreamtime Science, where we turn fascinating discoveries into bedtime companions. Tonight's journey promises something genuinely intriguing. I've been thinking a lot about why we sometimes put things off, even when we know it might make life a little trickier later on. There's something remarkable about that tug of war between what feels good right now and what's better for us down the line. I'm excited to share a few gentle discoveries about why our minds dance with this battle between now and later. It might just change how you see your own little pauses. If you find peace in these nocturnal discoveries, consider becoming a regular visitor to our quiet corner of science. Share in the comments what topic you'd love to dream about next. Let's prepare for tonight's journey. Find your most comfortable position, let tension float away from your body, and take 3 slow, peaceful breaths. Beneath the hush of midnight, where shadows soften and the mind drifts unanchored, the ancient pull of the present tugs at us all. It is a call older than words, older even than civilization, a whisper that curls around the edges of consciousness, urging us to linger in the comfort of now, to surrender to the pleasures that shimmer just within reach. This is the siren's call of the present, a melody as sweet as it is perilous, echoing through the tapestry of human life. Long before the clock became the tyrant of modern schedules, before calendars etched their gridwork onto every waking day, humanity knew this call. It was woven into the fabric of myth and legend, immortalized in the stories we told ourselves to make sense of our own longings and lapses. Among these stories, one stands out, the voyage of Odysseus as he sailed the wine-dark sea, his heart heavy with the ache of home and the weight of his choices. As the tale is told, Odysseus, king of Ithaca and cunning hero of the Greeks, comes to a stretch of ocean feared by all sailors, the haunted waters where the sirens dwell. These creatures, half woman and half bird, do not threaten with tooth or talon. Their weapon is sweeter, subtler, a song so enchanting that none who hear it can resist. The melody promises knowledge, pleasure, and fulfillment beyond reckoning, luring sailors to forget their destination, to abandon their oars, and to dash their ships upon the rocks. Odysseus, wise to the dangers but curious about the song, devises a plan. He plugs the ears of his crew with beeswax, rendering them deaf to the siren's music, and has himself lashed to the mast, vulnerable but restrained. As they sail near, the siren's voices rise. Odysseus thrashes against his bonds, desperate to surrender to the music, to leap into the sea and lose himself in the sweetness of the moment. But his bonds hold. They pass safely by, the song receding into silence, and the journey continues. This, perhaps, is the myth of procrastination. The siren's song is nothing less than the allure of the present moment, the gravitational pull of immediate delight over distant reward. It is the overwhelming urge to stop rowing toward Ithaca, toward the future we hope to build, and to simply abandon ourselves to the pleasures laid before us. The story is not just a warning, but a reflection of an inner struggle that has echoed through human hearts across the ages. Why is this struggle so universal? Why do we, with all our intellect and ambition, so often falter when faced with the prospect of delayed gratification? The answer, as it turns out, is woven into the very architecture of the mind and body, a legacy of evolution, biology, and the peculiar demands of our environment. To understand this, let us drift forward through the centuries, from the mythic seas of Odysseus to a quieter, more modern chamber, a nondescript room bathed in soft light where a child sits alone at a table. Before the child rests a single marshmallow on a pristine white plate. The air is thick with anticipation, though the room is silent. This is the setting for one of the most famous experiments in the annals of psychology, the marshmallow test. Devised by Walter Mischel and his colleagues in the 1960s, the experiment is deceptively simple. A child is offered a choice: eat the marshmallow now or wait, usually about 15 minutes, and receive a second marshmallow as a reward. The researchers leave the room, and the struggle begins. Some children yield almost immediately, their tiny hands snatching up the treat. Others fidget, squirm, sing to themselves, or even cover their eyes, employing every strategy they can muster to resist temptation. A few, with Herculean effort, manage to wait, earning their sweet prize. The test, repeated in various forms and with countless children, seems at first glance to be a measure of self-control, a stark dividing line between those who can delay gratification and those who cannot. Yet beneath its surface lies a deeper story. The marshmallow is not just a treat, it is a symbol of all the immediate pleasures that tempt us away from our goals. The lure of a glowing screen when work calls, the comfort of a warm bed when duty beckons, the siren song of now drowning out the call of tomorrow. For years, the results of the marshmallow test were interpreted as a kind of moral fable. Those who waited, it was said, reaped the rewards later in life, higher SAT scores, better jobs, even healthier bodies. The children who snatched the marshmallow quickly were perhaps doomed to lives of impulsivity and regret. But as the years passed and the data grew richer, the story became more nuanced. Researchers realized that a child's ability to wait did not arise in a vacuum. It was shaped by trust that the promised reward would actually come, trust in the adults conducting the test, trust that the future would be kind. Imagine for a moment growing up in a world where promises are often broken, where tomorrow's meal is uncertain, where patience is rarely rewarded. In such a world, seizing the treat now is not a failure of willpower, but a rational response to uncertainty. The siren's song is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is a guide through choppy waters, a lifeline in a world where the future is shrouded in mist. And yet, even when the future is assured, even when we know intellectually that waiting will yield greater rewards, the present retains its grip. The immediacy of a pleasure, a distraction, a comfort, these things are vivid and tangible, while the benefits of patience remain abstract, distant, and uncertain. This is not a flaw, but a feature of the human mind. Our brains evolved not for spreadsheets and retirement plans, but for survival on the savannah, where tomorrow was never guaranteed, and the present moment was often a matter of life and death. Deep within the brain, a tug-of-war unfolds, pitting ancient circuits against the new. The limbic system, seat of emotion and desire, urges us to grasp what we can while we can, to savor the sweetness of now. The prefrontal cortex, more recent in evolutionary terms, whispers a different message: wait, plan, invest, hope. Sometimes the cortex wins, and we chart a course to Ithaca. Sometimes the limbic system overpowers us, and we drift, helpless and content, toward the rocks. This inner conflict is not merely a matter of willpower, nor is it unique to any one culture or era. It is a universal theme, played out in countless variations across the centuries. Ancient philosophers pondered it in their own terms. The Stoics counseled self-mastery, urging adherents to resist the temptations of pleasure and pain alike. The Buddhists spoke of mindfulness, the art of observing desire without being ruled by it. Even in the bustling marketplaces of medieval cities, merchants and craftsmen weighed the rewards of patience against the risks of delay. Yet for all our wisdom, the siren's song persists, adapting to each new age. In modern times, it takes on new forms, amplified by technology and abundance. The beeping of notifications, the endless scroll of social feeds, the flickering promise of one more episode or game. These are the new melodies that beckon us away from our chosen paths. They are engineered to be irresistible, their pleasures immediate and their rewards certain. Against such forces, the bonds of Odysseus seem quaint, almost naive. But if the siren's call is universal, so too is the longing for something more. We yearn not only for pleasure, but for accomplishment, meaning, and purpose. We dream of futures that shine just beyond the horizon, a finished book, a learned skill, a life well lived. The tension between these desires is the engine of human striving, the source of both our greatest triumphs and our most familiar frustrations. Consider, in the quiet of this night, the countless small moments when the pull of the present has redirected your course. The project set aside for another day, the promise to start anew tomorrow, the gentle slide into distraction. Each moment is a choice, sometimes conscious, often automatic, a dance between the demands of now and the promises of later. The outcome is rarely dramatic, but over time, the accumulation of these choices shapes the arc of a life. The world around us is attuned to the power of this dynamic. Advertisers and designers study the art of temptation, crafting experiences that reward immediacy and stoke desire. Institutions preach the gospel of productivity, urging us to resist, to persevere, to harness every moment in service of the future. And somewhere between these competing forces, the individual must navigate, steering between the rocks and reefs, listening for the faint strains of the sirens, while keeping an eye on distant shores. Yet for all its challenges, the struggle is not a condemnation. There is a kind of grace in our susceptibility, a reminder of our shared humanity. The siren's song, after all, is not a curse, but an invitation to be present, to savor, to experience life as it unfolds. The danger lies not in hearing the melody, but in being swept away by it, in losing sight of the journey for the sake of a single, fleeting note. So, as you drift towards sleep, ponder the paradox at the heart of procrastination, the simultaneous allure and peril of the present. It is a phenomenon that has captivated poets and scientists alike, a mystery as deep as the sea. In the days to come, we will plumb its depths further, seeking not only to understand why we so often yield to temptation, but how we might navigate its currents with wisdom and grace. For now, let the echoes of the sirens linger in your thoughts. Let the memory of marshmallows and ancient songs weave through your dreams. The journey is far from over, and the mysteries of the mind await just beyond the horizon, where the present meets the promise of what is yet to come. Within the hushed recesses of your mind, softly pulsing beneath conscious thought, a labyrinth unfurls. Its corridors are twisting, shifting, sometimes familiar, sometimes strange. In this living maze, every intention is a thread stretched taut between the bright clarity of purpose and the shadowy allure of delay. And somewhere at its heart, hidden yet ever-present, waits the minotaur of procrastination, powerful, cunning, a force both part of you and apart from you. To step into this labyrinth is to enter the tangled depths of human motivation and will, to peer closely at the mechanisms that govern why we so often postpone what matters most. The ancients spun tales of Daedalian architecture, of mythic beasts lurking at the center. Today, we turn to the intricate circuitry of our brains, to the invisible but no less daunting passageways etched in neural tissue. Our goal is not to slay the Minotaur, but to understand its nature, its motives, the push and pull that keep us wandering within its maze. Begin with a gentle, almost imperceptible tension, a whisper within the mind. You know what must be done. The report that waits on the desk, the phone call unsent, the sketch half-dreamed but never begun. You sense the weight of these unfinished tasks, yet as you approach, a strange resistance rises. The intention falters. Suddenly, a distraction gleams in the periphery, an easier pleasure beckons, and you turn away, promising yourself, later, soon. This is not mere laziness, nor a simple lack of will. It is, as neuroscience shows us, a dance of dueling forces, an ancient struggle between networks of the brain, each with its own agenda. The chief players in this cerebral contest are the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The prefrontal cortex, perched elegantly at the very front of the brain, is the seat of our highest reasoning. It is the planner, the architect, the part of you that gazes into the future and weighs possibilities. Here, abstract goals are born, priorities are sorted, and the concept of later acquires substance and shape. But the prefrontal cortex is not alone. Deep within the temporal lobes, nestled like a pair of almond-shaped sentinels, the amygdala stands guard. The amygdala is ancient, primal, a wellspring of emotion and instinct. It is attuned to danger, alert to threat, exquisitely sensitive to discomfort and unease. When you contemplate a task that feels overwhelming, tedious, or fraught with uncertainty, it is the amygdala that sounds the alarm, flooding the mind with aversion, anxiety, even dread. Picture, for a moment, a relay race within your mind. The prefrontal cortex, holding the baton of intention, surges forward. I will begin now. The task is important. My future self will thank me. But as the baton nears the handoff, the amygdala interjects, its whisper rising to a shout. Wait, this is hard. This is unpleasant. Wouldn't you rather do something easier, safer, more immediately rewarding? The baton wavers. Progress slows. The maze thickens. This is the core of procrastination, not a single flaw, but a contest between systems. The prefrontal cortex, slow and deliberative, crafts plans and projects. The amygdala, swift and emotional, tugs you toward comfort, away from perceived pain. Their struggle is not merely metaphorical, it is enacted physically, electrically, in the firing of neurons and the surge of chemical messengers. When the amygdala's voice grows loud, when a task feels threatening or failure seems likely, its fear signals can overwhelm the prefrontal cortex, hijacking the mind's agenda and steering you, almost helplessly, toward distraction. Yet the labyrinth is more subtle still. Threaded through these corridors is the peculiar phenomenon known as temporal discounting. Human beings, for all our reasoning power, are creatures of the present moment. We value immediate rewards far more highly than distant ones. This quirk of psychology was once adaptive. In the uncertain wilds of prehistory, a guaranteed meal today was preferable to the promise of a feast next week. But in the modern world, with its long arcs of planning and delayed gratification, this bias often leads us astray. Imagine you are offered a choice, a single sweet grape now or a luscious cluster tomorrow. Rationally, the cluster is superior, but the immediacy of the single grape, its nearness, its certainty, can outweigh all logic. So it is with tasks and rewards. The pleasure of checking social media, nibbling a snack, or rearranging your bookshelves is immediate and assured. The satisfaction of finishing a report, though far greater, is distant and uncertain, awaiting you only if you can traverse the maze unimpeded. This is the struggle between your now self and your future self, two versions of you locked in perpetual negotiation. The now self is impulsive, pleasure-seeking, acutely sensitive to discomfort. The future self is wise, patient, the custodian of long-term goals. Over and again, the now self tugs you from the path, plucking low-hanging fruit while the future self looks on, powerless to intervene. Only when you step into the future do you become the new now self, inheriting the consequences of your earlier choices. Thus, the cycle repeats, and the labyrinth winds on. But the Minotaur is not only a beast of fear and avoidance. Sometimes it masquerades as perfectionism, wearing the mask of high standards. You may hesitate to begin a task, not because it is unpleasant, but because it must be perfect, flawless, unassailable. The prefrontal cortex, in its zeal for order, conjures an image of the ideal outcome, so radiant and complete that any first step seems paltry by comparison. The amygdala, sensing the risk of falling short, redoubles its alarms. What if you fail? What if you disappoint? Thus the maze deepens, corridors multiplying, each turn leading to another hesitation. Perfectionism and procrastination become twin faces of the same entity, both rooted in a fear of inadequacy, both trapping you in endless preparation, endless delay. In the shifting light of this labyrinth, procrastination can also be a kind of rebellion. The tasks that await you are not always chosen. They are assigned, demanded, imposed. Somewhere in the depths, another voice stirs. Why should I? Who decides what is urgent, what is important? The prefrontal cortex may lay out the logic, but the amygdala, in concert with other limbic allies, can bristle at perceived coercion. Defiance, subtle or overt, becomes another thread in the tapestry of delay. Here, procrastination is not a failure of will, but a quiet assertion of agency, a way to reclaim control in a world of endless obligation. Yet for all its intricacies, the labyrinth of delay is not impenetrable. The shape of its walls, the nature of its turns, can be mapped, if only dimly, by the tools of modern neuroscience. With functional MRI scanners, researchers peer into the living brain, watching as the prefrontal cortex and amygdala trade signals, as networks of motivation and emotion light up or dim. They see, in real time, the flicker of temptation, the surge of avoidance, the slow, determined activation of will. They study the neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, that color our moods and sharpen our focus, or, just as easily, scatter our intentions to the winds. One striking discovery is the role of dopamine, the brain's currency of reward. When you anticipate a pleasurable outcome, a finished project, a word of praise, dopamine flows, priming you for action. But when the reward feels distant, or the path is uncertain, this flow diminishes. The task begins to seem arid, uninviting. The minotaur grows restless, its presence looming. In these moments, small, immediate rewards, those grapes of the present, gain a magnetic pull, their promise amplified by the neural circuitry of desire. So too does stress play its part. Under pressure, the amygdala's alarms ring louder. The body floods with cortisol, the stress hormone, heightening vigilance but dulling the patient reasoning of the prefrontal cortex. In the grip of anxiety, the maze seems to close in, every path doubling back, every turn a dead end. The urge to flee, to escape into distraction, becomes irresistible. Yet paradoxically, some stress, a measured dose, can sharpen focus, rouse the prefrontal cortex to rally, to push through the fog. The balance is delicate, easily tipped. And then there is habit, that silent architect of behavior. Neural pathways, once traveled, become easier to traverse. Procrastination, repeated, etches its own grooves, making delay the default, the path of least resistance. But habits can be reshaped, if not erased. Each time you resist the minotaur's lure, each small act of beginning lays down new tracks, strengthens new circuits. The maze is mutable, alive, capable of change. For some, the labyrinth is more daunting still. Those with disorders of attention or mood, ADHD, depression, anxiety, find their prefrontal cortexes less able to marshal effort, their amygdalas more prone to alarm. Here, procrastination is not a simple choice, but a symptom, a signal that the balance of power within the mind is askew. Understanding this is vital, for it reminds us that the labyrinth is not the same for all who walk it. Some corridors are narrower, some minotaurs fiercer. Beyond the neuroscience, the metaphor of the labyrinth endures because it captures the lived experience of procrastination, the sense of wandering, of intentions lost and found, of progress halted and resumed. Each person's maze is unique, shaped by memory, temperament, circumstance. Some find their way with ease, others circle endlessly, searching for Ariadne's thread, a lifeline to guide them out. And what of the minotaur, the entity at the maze's center? It is easy to cast it as pure adversary, the enemy within. but perhaps it is better understood as a part of you, a guardian even, of rest and play, of caution and self-preservation. Its methods may be clumsy, its timing poor, but its motives are not always malign. Sometimes, in delaying, you discover what truly matters. Sometimes, the path not taken leads to unexpected insight. The maze is not a prison, but a landscape, a territory to be explored. So, as you drift through the corridors of your own mind, notice the patterns of delay, the moments when intention falters, the turns where distraction beckons. Listen for the dialogue between the planner and the protector, the now self and the future self. Feel the tug of immediate pleasure, the chill of distant fear, the weight of imagined perfection. You are not lost, but wandering, tracing the contours of a labyrinth as old as thought itself. And somewhere ahead, faint but growing, is the promise of understanding. The Minotaur is not vanquished, but revealed, its presence no longer a mystery, but a companion on the journey. The maze winds on, the next chamber waiting, its secrets yet to unfold. The walls shimmer with possibility, the path uncertain but yours to follow step by step, deeper into the heart of delay. In the stillness of late night, when the world is wrapped in velvet and time seems to slow, let us slip quietly into the corridors of curiosity, where the act of procrastination is not just a personal struggle, but a subject under the keen gaze of science. Long before the first brain scanner whirred to life, long before double-blind studies and digital surveys, the ancient world grappled with the enigma of why humans so often defer the necessary in favor of the pleasant or the trivial. The story of how we probe the procrastinating mind is, itself, a journey through centuries, a delicate interplay between philosophy and neuroscience, between behavior and belief. Our trail begins in the ancient Mediterranean, beneath the porticos of Athens, where the philosopher Socrates walked and talked and questioned. For Socrates, procrastination was not a mere lapse of will, but a manifestation of a deeper human perplexity, a tension that the Greeks named akrasia. Akrasia, the state of knowing the right course, yet failing to follow it. The mind divided, reason eclipsed by impulse. Socrates challenged his interlocutors to consider why a person, fully aware that action would bring benefit, still failed to act. His student, Plato, would echo and elaborate upon this theme, and Aristotle in turn would dissect it further, seeking causes in the structure of the soul itself, reason at war with desire. In those ancient dialogues, the seeds were sown for a question that would echo through millennia. When we procrastinate, what is it that pulls us away from our own intentions? The philosophers gave us language, akrasia, weakness of will, internal conflict. But it would take centuries, and the rise of science, to move from poetic description to empirical investigation. Leap forward, across the centuries, to a world transformed by the scientific revolution. Here, the mind is no longer the domain of philosophers alone, but of psychologists, economists, and neuroscientists, each armed with their own tools and theories. In the bustling laboratories of the 20th and 21st centuries, procrastination becomes a subject to be measured, quantified, and observed. Consider for a moment how one might capture the elusive nature of procrastination in an experiment. The challenge is subtle. Procrastination is not a tangible object, but a pattern, an unfolding of choice and avoidance over time. Early researchers turned to ingenious behavioral experiments. A classic approach is deceptively simple. Offer participants a choice between two tasks, one immediately pleasurable but less rewarding, the other demanding but ultimately beneficial. This setup, known in the literature as a delay discounting task, reveals a universal human tendency. Faced with the option of a small, immediate reward or a larger delayed one, many of us are drawn toward the immediate, even when reason counsels otherwise. Behavioral economists, fascinated by this pattern, have woven it into the fabric of their theories. Richard Thaler and Hersh Sheffrin, in the late 1970s, formalize the concept of time inconsistency, the observation that our preferences change depending on when a decision is framed. Today, I may vow to begin my project tomorrow, but when tomorrow arrives, the promise is quietly renegotiated. This temporal dance, where present desires eclipse future intentions, is mapped mathematically by what is called hyperbolic discounting. The further away a reward, the less its value seems to our present selves. The nearer the temptation, the harder it is to resist. The laboratory becomes a stage for these dramas of will. In one experiment, students are told they can choose between receiving a small cash payment today or a larger one in a week. Again and again, the allure of immediacy wins. Yet when the same students are asked to choose between a reward in 30 days versus a larger reward in 37 days, they are more likely to wait. The only difference is distance from the present, a subtle bias, yet one that shapes decisions from daily chores to lifelong plans. Meanwhile, psychologists devise questionnaires and scales to peer into the habits of procrastinators. The Procrastination Assessment Scale for students, for instance, asks about the frequency and consequences of delay in academic settings. The General Procrastination Scale broadens the lens, seeking patterns across all walks of life. These tools illuminate the diversity of procrastination's forms. For some, it is the avoidance of aversive tasks. For others, the pursuit of stimulation. For still others, a response to anxiety or perfectionism. Yet, to truly understand the roots of procrastination, scientists have turned their gaze inward to the humming circuits of the brain itself. In hushed rooms bathed in the blue glow of control screens, volunteers slip into the bore of the functional magnetic resonance imaging scanner, the fMRI. Here, a different kind of observation unfolds, one that seeks not just patterns of behavior, but the neural choreography that underlies them. The fMRI scanner measures changes in blood flow, a proxy for activity in the brain's networks. In studies of procrastination, researchers often focus on two regions in particular: the prefrontal cortex, seat of planning and self-control, and the limbic system, source of emotion and impulse. A classic experiment might ask participants to contemplate an unpleasant task while their brains are scanned. Those who habitually procrastinate show heightened activity in the amygdala, a region associated with fear and threat detection when faced with aversive tasks. Simultaneously, the prefrontal cortex, which might otherwise marshal effort and inhibit avoidance, is less active. This neurological portrait is striking. For the chronic procrastinator, the brain responds to a looming task not merely as a neutral obligation, but as a potential source of pain. The emotional brain sounds an alarm, urging avoidance, while the executive brain struggles to assert control. The result is delay, rationalization, and often guilt. But the story does not end there. Some studies have found that over time, chronic procrastinators may develop habits of avoidance so deeply ingrained that certain circuits in the brain become less responsive to cues of future reward. The present looms large, the future recedes into abstraction. This is the neural echo of hyperbolic discounting, rendered in living tissue and electrical pulses. Other experiments add further layers to this portrait. In one, researchers ask volunteers to choose between working on a difficult puzzle now or engaging in a relaxing activity while their brains are scanned. Those prone to procrastination show diminished connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the regions responsible for motivation and reward. The bridge that might link intention to action is weakened. The mind's resolve, easily undone by distraction. As the evidence accumulates, a new understanding emerges. Procrastination is not simply a matter of laziness or poor character, as it was once thought. It is a complex interplay of emotion, cognition, and neurobiology. It is the outcome of a system evolved for survival, now challenged by the peculiar demands of modern life, where deadlines and abstract goals replace the immediate urgencies of hunger or danger. Behavioral experiments, too, have grown more subtle and diverse. In the realm of behavioral economics, researchers have devised ingenious ways to nudge people toward action. Commitment devices, mechanisms that bind us to our intentions, are tested in the lab and in real-world settings. A classic example is the pre-commitment contract, where individuals voluntarily impose penalties on themselves for failing to follow through. In one famous study, students were allowed to set their own deadlines for a series of assignments, with the knowledge that earlier deadlines would incur penalties if missed. Most students opted for intermediate deadlines, rather than leaving everything to the last moment, a tacit admission of their own limits and a testament to the power of self-binding. Meanwhile, longitudinal studies follow individuals over years, seeking to understand the long-term consequences of habitual delay. These studies reveal not only the academic and professional costs of procrastination, but also its toll on health, relationships, and well-being. Chronic procrastinators are more likely to report stress, illness, and lower life satisfaction. The pattern is not deterministic. Many who struggle with procrastination find ways to adapt or compensate, but the correlation is clear. The questions posed by ancient philosophers find new life in these modern investigations. Socrates asked whether knowledge alone was enough to guarantee right action. Psychologists test this by providing participants with information about the consequences of delay and observing whether behavior changes. Often it does not. Awareness of the problem is necessary, but not sufficient. The gap between intention and action yawns wide, filled with emotion, habit, and context. Yet the tools of science offer not only diagnosis, but also hope. The rise of cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, is grounded in the understanding that habits of thought and behavior can be reshaped. Experiments show that interventions focusing on emotion regulation, teaching individuals to tolerate discomfort, to reframe tasks as less threatening, can reduce procrastination. Mindfulness practices, too, have shown promise, helping individuals to observe their impulses without immediate reaction, to let the urge to delay pass like a cloud across the sky. In the digital age, the study of procrastination takes on new dimensions. The very devices that tempt us toward distraction, the smartphone, the streaming service, the endless scroll, also become instruments of measurement. Researchers track patterns of online behavior, tracing the rhythms of work and avoidance in real time. Algorithms sift through mountains of data, seeking the telltale signatures of delay, the spike in social media use before a deadline, the flurry of low-priority emails, the sudden interest in cleaning or organizing. The science of procrastination, then, is a tapestry woven from many threads. Philosophers give us the language of conflict and self-mastery. Behavioral economists model our temporal inconsistencies. Neuroscientists reveal the brain's circuits of desire and restraint. Psychologists map the terrain of emotion and habit. Each discipline brings its own light, its own questions, its own tools, and still the mystery endures. Why do we sometimes act against our own interests, knowing full well the cost? Why does the mind, in all its complexity, find it so hard to bring intention into harmony with action? The answers are partial, evolving, layered with nuance and contradiction. As we drift deeper into the night, let us linger with these questions, not as burdens, but as invitations to further wonder. The study of procrastination is, at heart, a study of what it means to be human, to dream and to falter, to aspire and to delay, to be at once the architect of one's destiny and the saboteur of one's own plans. Beyond the laboratory, beyond the scanner's hum and the economist's model, the story continues. There are new frontiers yet to be explored, new technologies, new interventions, new ways of understanding the mind's intricate dance between now and later. Perhaps in the hush that follows, we might glimpse the next step, a future where the science of procrastination not only explains, but gently guides us toward the balance we seek. For now, the journey continues, the questions beckon, and the night is still deep with possibility. There is a hush in the room now, a kind of stillness that settles in after a journey through hidden chambers of the mind and the winding corridors of time. In this gentle pause, we arrive at a curious junction where the science of delay meets something more elusive, the deep and perennial mystery of being human. Here, the phenomenon of procrastination stands not simply as a foible, a quirk of our neural machinery, but as a mirror reflecting our tangled relationship with past, present, and future. It is a shadow cast by our awareness of time, a riddle woven into the very fabric of consciousness. Let us linger for a while in this twilight zone between the now and the not yet. All around the world, across cultures and epochs, people have found themselves caught in the same strange dance. A student, pen poised but unmoving, stares at a blank page as days slip by. An artist circles her canvas, awaiting the surge of certainty that will bring the first stroke. A lover hesitates at the threshold of confession. Each is visited by the familiar spectre of delay. It is tempting to see this as a mere failing, a weakness of will, a failure to marshal the self into action. But the universality of procrastination whispers that something deeper is at play. To truly understand, we must look inward to the layered structure of selfhood. You may recall, from moments of quiet introspection, that the self is not a fixed point, but an unfolding story. There is the self of yesterday, the self of today, and the imagined self of tomorrow, each casting their own desires and anxieties into the stream of consciousness. The philosopher Derek Parfit once described personal identity not as a single, unbroken thread, but as a series of overlapping selves, a bundle of psychological continuities. Procrastination, in this view, emerges from the friction between these selves. The present self, enfolded in the warm cocoon of the now, is driven by the immediacy of pleasure and the avoidance of discomfort. The future self, distant and indistinct, is the one who must bear the cost of our choices. Like neighbours who rarely meet, the two are bound together yet always slightly out of sync. When we procrastinate, we are, in essence, borrowing time from our future self, a kind of temporal debt whose interest compounds with each moment of delay. This interplay is more than mere metaphor. Neuroimaging studies reveal that when people think about their future selves, the brain patterns activated are strikingly similar to those used when imagining a stranger. It is as though, deep down, we regard our future selves as other people, worthy of some concern perhaps, but never quite as real as the person we are right now. This cognitive gap helps explain why it feels so easy to defer a task, even when we know, rationally, that the consequences will land on us eventually. Our minds are time travelers, but our hearts are homebodies, content to nestle in the comfort of the present. Yet this temporal disconnect is not always a curse. It is in some ways the source of our creativity and adaptability. Unmoored from the tyranny of immediate action, the mind is free to wander, to drift into reverie, to explore unlikely connections. This is the paradox at the heart of procrastination. It is both a failure and a gift. Consider the life of Leonardo da Vinci, the archetype of the creative procrastinator. His notebooks, dense with sketches, mirror-written notes, and half-finished treatises, testify to a restless intellect forever flitting from one project to the next. For years he put off completing commissions, frustrating his patrons and sometimes leaving works unfinished. Yet in the interstices of delay, Leonardo's mind roamed freely, gathering inspiration from anatomy, hydraulics, flight, and the play of light on water. His procrastination was fertile ground for innovation. The very act of not doing, of stalling and circling, became the crucible in which new ideas were forged. Psychologists call this kind of delay active procrastination, a period when the conscious mind steps aside and the unconscious mind makes its own subtle connections. It is as if the mind, left to its own devices, weaves together threads from disparate domains, braiding them into unexpected patterns. In this way, procrastination can be not just a thief of time, but a gardener of insight. Yet not all delay is so fruitful. There is a darker side, where procrastination becomes a spiral of avoidance, breeding anxiety and regret. Here, the mind is trapped in a loop, replaying the same worries, rehearsing the same rationalizations. The German poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote of the terror of the open moment, the abyss that yawns between intention and action. It is in this space that many find themselves immobilized, paralyzed by the weight of expectation or the fear of failure. The longer the delay, the more formidable the task appears, until it looms like an unscalable mountain. This is the human paradox. The very faculties that allow us to imagine and plan for the future also burden us with the knowledge of all that could go wrong. We are, in the words of philosopher Martin Heidegger, beings toward the future, haunted by possibilities both bright and bleak. Our capacity for foresight is both a blessing and a source of existential dread. But what does this say about the nature of time itself and our place within it? Time, as experienced by humans, is not the even march of seconds and minutes measured by a clock. It is elastic, subjective, shaped by memory, anticipation, and emotion. A deadline can approach like a tidal wave, growing larger and more menacing as it draws near. A moment of inspiration can stretch out, luminous and unhurried, as if time itself has paused to listen. The philosopher Henry Bergson described this as duration, the inner flow of time as lived and felt, distinct from the mechanical ticking of the external world. In this lived time, procrastination becomes a kind of negotiation, a bargaining session between the selves we have been, the self we are, and the self we wish to become. Each delay is a wager, a hope that tomorrow's self will be stronger, wiser, or more inspired. Sometimes this bet pays off, often it does not. But always it is an expression of our uncertainty, our inability to know for sure which version of ourselves will show up when the moment comes. At the heart of this uncertainty lies a profound question. Who, exactly, is the I who procrastinates? Is it the rational planner, mapping out tasks and deadlines, the impulsive pleasure seeker, drawn to the easy distraction, or the anxious dreamer, paralyzed by the weight of possibility? The answer perhaps is all of these and none. The self is not a monolith but a shifting coalition, a parliament of voices, each with its own agenda. This parliament is constantly negotiating with time. Sometimes it is the voice of reason that prevails, spurring us to action. At other times it is the voice of doubt or desire, whispering that now is not the right moment. In this way, procrastination becomes a kind of self-communication, a dialogue across the gulf of time. When we delay, we are not simply evading a task. We are sending a message to our future self, a note tucked into the folds of time. Handle this when you are ready. I cannot do it now. Yet, for all its perils, procrastination is also a testament to our capacity for hope. To put something off is to believe, if only for a moment, that there will be another chance, another day, another self who is up to the task. It is, in its way, a leap of faith. This faith, however tenuous, is what allows procrastination to be harnessed for creativity rather than despair. The key lies in how we relate to our future selves. If we see them as enemies, as the ones who must pay for our present comfort, then delay becomes a source of guilt and self-reproach. But if we see them as partners, as collaborators in the unfolding story of our lives, then procrastination can become a space for gestation, a time for ideas to ripen and mature. Some writers and artists have learned to work with their procrastination, treating it as a phase in the creative process rather than an obstacle to be vanquished. The composer Aaron Copland once described his routine as consisting of long periods of fruitful idleness, punctuated by bursts of intense activity. The idleness, far from being wasted, was a time for subconscious processing, for letting ideas simmer below the surface. When the moment of action arrived, the work would pour forth with surprising ease. Perhaps the trick, then, is not to eliminate procrastination, but to befriend it, to recognize its rhythms and learn to dance with its strange music. This means cultivating a kind of mindfulness, an awareness of the shifting tides of motivation and energy. It means forgiving ourselves for our delays, while gently steering ourselves back toward engagement when the time is right. It also means accepting that not all delays are within our control. There are times when the mind resists, when the body refuses to cooperate, when the world itself seems to conspire against us. In these moments, procrastination is not a choice but a condition, a manifestation of fatigue, illness, or the weight of circumstance. To berate ourselves for these delays is to misunderstand the complexity of the human condition, and so, as we sit in this quiet space between the now and the not yet, let us marvel at the intricate web of forces that shape our choices. Procrastination is not simply a flaw to be eradicated, but a window into the labyrinth of time, self, and desire. It is a reminder that we are both creatures of habit and agents of change, bound by our histories yet always reaching toward the future. There is a story told in many cultures of a traveler who arrives at a crossroads, uncertain of which path to take. The road ahead is shrouded in mist. The traveler hesitates, weighing options, imagining outcomes. In that moment of indecision, time seems to slow, possibilities multiply, and the world is suspended between past and future. It is a moment rich with potential, fraught with risk, and alive with the pulse of possibility. So too with procrastination. Each delay is a crossroads, a pause at the intersection of what is and what could be. In lingering, we give ourselves a chance to listen, to hear the quiet stirrings of intuition, the faint echoes of dreams, the subtle promptings of wisdom that too often go unheard in the rush to act. As you drift toward sleep, consider the paradox that defines us. We are beings caught between the urgencies of now and the uncertainties of tomorrow. Our procrastination is a symptom of this condition, but also a testament to our depth. It is the space in which we negotiate with our many selves, where we wrestle with our hopes and fears, where we invent new futures out of the raw material of possibility. What might it mean to embrace this paradox, not as a problem to be solved, but as a mystery to be lived? What if, in each moment of delay, there is the seed of transformation, the whisper of a future self waiting to emerge? The answers, if there are any, lie not in the certainties of science or the prescriptions of productivity manuals, but in the quiet spaces where thought turns inward and time becomes full. Fluid, it is there, in the interplay between action and inaction, that the story of our lives is written. The night deepens, and the world outside grows still. In these final moments before sleep claims you, let the unresolved questions linger. Let them drift like motes of dust in a shaft of light, neither demanding answers nor fleeing from mystery. For in this space between the now and the not yet, something essential unfolds, a dance of mind and time, of self and possibility, forever unfinished and forever beginning anew. As our journey through the delicate dance of now and later gently drifts to a close, may the quiet stars of understanding twinkle softly in your mind like a comet tail fading into the hush of space. Rest easy with these peaceful thoughts, and when you're ready, return once more to explore the next Dreamtime tale waiting just beyond the cosmic horizon.